My abusive father stopped talking to me after I confronted him. I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that every word of this is true, even though part of me still can't believe I'm finally saying it out loud. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm 21 years old. I live in North Africa, and 2 months ago I tried to end my life because of my father. What matters even more is what happened after, when I finally found the courage to confront him, and how that single act of speaking my truth has left me trapped in a silence so thick I can barely breathe through it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why his silence is destroying me, you need to understand the sound of his voice, the way it could shift from warm to venomous in a heartbeat, the way it filled every room in our house until there was no space left for anyone else's words, the way it taught me that my own voice was something dangerous that needed to be swallowed down and hidden away. My first memory is of violence. I was 5, maybe 6 years old, and I remember the sound more than anything else. The metallic clang of the chair hitting the wall, then hitting me over and over while I curled into the corner of our living room trying to make myself smaller, trying to disappear. I remember my arms raised over my head, the way children instinctively protect themselves even when they don't understand what they're being protected from. I remember the food scattered across the floor, rice and sauce and broken plates, because my mother and I had been arguing about something trivial, something I can't even recall now, and we'd raised our voices. That was the crime, raising our voices in his house as if sound itself was a form of disobedience. I need you to understand something about my father before I go any further. He wasn't a monster all the time. That's what makes this so complicated, so impossible to explain to people who've never lived in a house where love and terror sleep in the same bed. We were middle class, comfortable even. I never went hungry. I always had clean clothes, good quality things, the latest games and electronics that other kids envied. From the outside, we looked like a normal family, maybe even a fortunate one. My father provided for us, and in our culture, in our community, that provision was supposed to be enough. That provision was supposed to buy our silence, our gratitude, our obedience. But I paid for every toy, every meal, every piece of clothing with pieces of myself that I can never get back. My father had been married before my mother. His first wife died and left him with 3 children, my half-siblings, though I've never thought of them that way. They're just my siblings, the older ones who sometimes tried to shield me and my brother from the worst of it, though they carried their own scars from years of living under his rule. Then he married my mother and had 2 more children. My brother, who's 2 years older than me, and me. 7 people living in a house that should have been filled with warmth, but instead felt like a pressure cooker, the tension building and building until it exploded in violence. The chair incident wasn't isolated. It was a pattern, a rhythm we all learned to dance to. There was the time he grabbed me by my hair, I must have been 10 or 11, and dragged me across the floor. I remember the burning in my scalp, the way my neck twisted at an angle that made me think it might snap. He slammed my head against the wall once, twice, 3 times, and I remember thinking with strange clarity that this was how I was going to die, that my skull would crack open and that would be the end of it. But it didn't crack. Instead, he locked me in his room and whipped me with his belt, the leather leaving welts across my back and legs that I had to hide under long sleeves and pants for weeks. I was less than 12 years old. The physical abuse was almost easier to process than the emotional warfare, the financial manipulation, the constant threats that hung over our heads like swords suspended by threads. He would threaten to stop spending money on us, to disown us, to throw us out into the street if we didn't obey, if we didn't perform our roles perfectly in the family theater he'd constructed. And we believed him, because we'd seen his rage, we knew what he was capable of, and we understood that our survival depended on our compliance. I became the most obedient daughter you could imagine. I never said no to him. I never disagreed with him. I never raised my voice in his presence. I learned to read his moods like a weather system, to predict the storms before they hit, to make myself invisible when the pressure started building. I got good grades. I dressed modestly. I followed every rule of our culture and religion. I smiled when I was supposed to smile and stayed silent when silence was required. I thought if I was perfect enough, good enough, obedient enough, maybe the violence would stop. Maybe he would love me the way fathers are supposed to love their daughters. But perfection is never enough for men who need to break things to feel powerful. When I was 13, I discovered he was cheating on my mother. I caught him. I won't go into the details because they still make me feel sick, and I carried that secret like a stone in my chest for years. What was I supposed to do with that information? Tell my mother and risk destroying what little stability we had? Confront him and face his rage? So I did what I'd been trained to do. I swallowed it down and pretended I didn't know, adding it to the growing collection of things we didn't talk about in our family. The physical abuse stopped when I was 14 or 15. I don't know if it was because I got older, because I'd learned perfect obedience, or because he simply found other ways to hurt us that didn't leave visible marks. The emotional and financial abuse continued, evolved, became more sophisticated. He controlled every aspect of our lives through money, through threats, through the constant reminder that everything we had came from him and could be taken away at his whim. I survived like that for years. I went to university, I pursued my master's degree, I built a life that looked successful from the outside, while inside I was hollowing out, becoming less and less of a person and more of a performance. I had friends who thought I was lucky to have a father who provided so well for me. I had relatives who praised my obedience, my modesty, my respect for family values. No one saw the cost of that obedience, the way I'd learned to amputate parts of myself to fit into the shape my father demanded. And then 2 months ago, something broke. I can't even tell you what the final trigger was. There wasn't one specific incident, just the accumulated weight of 21 years of swallowing my voice, my pain, my truth. I was home alone while my family was traveling, and I found myself standing in the bathroom with a bottle of pills in my hand, thinking that this was the only way out, the only way to make the pain stop. I took them. I really took them. I wanted to die. But somewhere in the fog of that decision, some part of me that still wanted to live fought back. I called my brother, my voice barely working, and told him what I'd done. He came home immediately, took me to the hospital, stayed with me through the night while they pumped my stomach and monitored my vital signs and asked me questions I couldn't answer. I'm well now, physically at least. The pills didn't do permanent damage to my body, but something had shifted. Surviving that night, choosing to survive, calling for help instead of letting the pills do their work, it cracked something open inside me. I realized I couldn't keep living the way I had been, couldn't keep pretending that obedience would save me, couldn't keep protecting my father from the consequences of his actions. When my parents came back from their trip, I made a decision that terrified me. I was going to tell the truth, all of it. I was going to confront my father about the abuse, confront my mother about why she'd never left him, why she'd chosen to stay in a marriage that had damaged all of us so deeply. I was going to use my voice, the voice I'd spent my entire life suppressing, and I was going to make them hear me. I gathered my courage, and it took every ounce of courage I had, you have to understand that, and I sat them down and I spoke. I told my father about every incident I could remember, every time he'd hit me, every threat he'd made, every way he'd terrorized us. I told him about catching him cheating. I told him that his abuse was the reason I tried to kill myself, that he had broken something in me that I didn't know how to fix. I told my mother that her silence had been its own form of violence, that by staying with him she'd taught me that women's pain doesn't matter, that we're supposed to endure anything for the sake of family reputation. I said it all. Every word I'd been holding back for 16 years came pouring out, and for a moment, I felt powerful. I felt like I was finally taking up space, finally mattering, finally being seen. And do you know what my father said? He didn't apologize. He didn't show remorse. He didn't acknowledge a single thing I'd told him. Instead, he said, "What would people say if you had died? You would have destroyed this family." Not, "I'm sorry I hurt you." Not, "I'm sorry I made you want to die." Just concern about his reputation, about what the neighbors and relatives would think, about how my death would have reflected on him. Even in that moment, even faced with the evidence of how badly he damaged me, he could only think about himself. My half-brother, one of the older siblings from my father's first marriage, he stepped up and defended me. He told our father that I was right, that the abuse had been real and terrible and unforgivable. I was grateful for that support, but I was also in disbelief, shock, unable to process that my father could hear everything I'd said and feel nothing but anger at being called out. My mother, trying to smooth things over the way she always did, forced me to hug him. She physically pushed me toward him and made me embrace this man who had just dismissed my pain, my trauma, my near death as nothing more than an inconvenience to his reputation. I did it because I was still, even then, trained to obey. But something in me died during that forced hug, some last hope that he might change, might see me, might love me. The next morning, he stopped talking to me. Just like that. Complete silence. My mother told me he was angry at me as if I was the one who had done something wrong by speaking the truth about what he'd done. I tried to talk to him, tried to bridge the gap, because even after everything, I was still trying to fix things, still trying to be the good daughter who makes everything okay. But he wouldn't respond. He looked through me like I was invisible, like I didn't exist. And that's when I made my decision. I will never speak to him again unless he speaks to me first. I will not chase after his approval anymore. I will not beg for his attention or his love or even his basic acknowledgement of my humanity. I am done. But here's what I didn't expect. The silence is worse than the violence ever was. When he was hitting me, at least I existed. I was something worth punishing, worth controlling, worth breaking. Now I'm nothing. I'm a ghost in my own home, moving through rooms where my father sits and reads his newspaper and drinks his tea and acts like I'm not there. My mother tries to mediate, tries to convince me to apologize. Apologize for what? For telling the truth? For surviving? But I can't. I physically cannot force those words out of my mouth. Everything I felt for him is gone. My faith in him as a father, my respect, even the gratitude I was supposed to feel for the money he spent raising me. It's all been replaced by hatred and rage so intense it scares me. I wish he would die. I actually wish my own father would die, and that thought makes me feel like a monster, but it's the truth. He ruined my life. He damaged my brain, my ability to trust, my sense of self-worth, and now it's my responsibility to fix what he broke, to heal wounds I didn't inflict on myself. I'm trying. I'm really trying. But it's hard to heal in the same environment that made you sick. The practical reality of my situation is this. I'm still living under his roof because in our culture, a daughter leaving home before marriage would destroy his reputation. And he cares more about that reputation than he cares about me. So he won't kick me out, but he's made my life as difficult as possible in other ways. He stopped giving me money. He took back the car he'd bought for me. He's verbally disowned me, telling relatives that I'm no longer his daughter. Though he hasn't made it official because that would require explaining why, and he can't explain why without admitting what he did. I can't stand living with him anymore. The silence is suffocating. Every day in this house feels like drowning in slow motion. But I'm a master's degree student, and I don't want to waste my education because of him. I don't want him to take that from me too. And in my country, it's nearly impossible to find a job that pays enough to cover rent and living expenses while also attending classes. The economy is difficult, opportunities are limited, especially for young women. I have a small hope. I'm applying for scholarships to study abroad, and I'm taking the IELTS exam this Saturday. If I can get accepted to a program in another country, maybe I can escape. But even if I get accepted, there are so many expenses I can't cover. Visa fees, plane tickets, deposits, all the costs of starting a new life somewhere else. I don't know how I'll manage it, but I'm trying because the alternative is staying here, and I don't think I can survive that. My friends tell me to apologize to him. My mother begs me to apologize. My aunts and other relatives, the ones who know what's happening, they all say the same thing. He's your father. You need to respect him. You need to keep the family together. What will people say? They tell me I'm being selfish, that I'm destroying the family, that I should be grateful for everything he's provided and overlook the abuse because that's what good daughters do. But I can't, I'm shattered. I can't even stand hearing his voice anymore. The sound of his footsteps in the hallway makes my heart race. The sight of him sitting in his chair makes me want to scream. How am I supposed to apologize for telling the truth? How am I supposed to go back to pretending everything is fine when I know it never was and never will be? I need solutions. I need practical advice on how to get out of this situation. I need to know how other people have escaped similar circumstances, how they've built new lives when they had no money, no support, no clear path forward. I need to know if it's possible to heal from this kind of damage, if the hatred I feel will ever transform into something less consuming, if I'll ever be able to trust people again or feel safe in the world. I also need to tell you about our culture, about the way abuse is normalized and hidden and perpetuated through generations. I need to tell you what my aunts said when they found out about my suicide attempt, how they blamed me for being weak, for not being grateful enough, for bringing shame on the family. I need to tell you about the secrets I've discovered since confronting my father, the things other family members have confessed to me about their own experiences with him, the pattern of violence that goes back further than I knew. But right now, in this moment, what I need most is to know that I'm not crazy for refusing to apologize. I need to know that my anger is justified, that my desire to escape is reasonable, that I'm not a bad daughter for choosing my own survival over family harmony. I need to know that the silence, his silence, the silence I'm choosing to maintain in response, doesn't make me as bad as him. Because here's what keeps me up at night. I'm terrified that I'm becoming like him. That my hatred, my rage, my wish for his death makes me just as monstrous as he is. That by refusing to forgive, by holding on to this anger, I'm letting him win, letting him continue to control my life even through his silence. But I also know that forgiveness without accountability is just another form of abuse. And he's never going to be accountable. He's never going to apologize or change or even admit that he did anything wrong. So what am I supposed to do with all this pain? Where am I supposed to put it? I'm writing this because I need someone to understand. I need someone to see me, really see me, in a way my father never has and never will. I need someone to tell me that speaking my truth was the right thing to do, even if it's made my life harder in the short term. I need someone to tell me that there's a way out of this, that I won't be trapped in this house, in this silence, in this rage forever. I'm 21 years old and I feel like my life is already over before it's really begun. But I'm also still here. I survived the pills. I survived the confrontation. I'm surviving the silence. And maybe that survival is enough for now. Maybe that's all I can ask of myself, to keep surviving, one day at a time, until I find a way to do more than just survive. If you've read this far, thank you. Thank you for witnessing my story, for holding space for my pain, for not telling me to just forgive and forget and move on. Thank you for understanding that some silences are louder than screams, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to break that silence until the other person is willing to speak the truth. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll get the scholarship, if I'll find a way to leave, if I'll ever have a relationship with my father again, or if I even want one. I don't know if the hatred will fade or if it will define me for the rest of my life. I don't know if I'll heal or if I'll just learn to live with the damage. But I know this. I will never apologize for telling the truth. I will never go back to being the silent, obedient daughter who swallows her pain to keep the peace. I will never again make myself smaller to make him feel bigger. The silence between us is a chasm now, wide and deep and maybe unbridgeable. But it's also a boundary, a line I've drawn that says, this far and no further. You cannot hurt me anymore. You cannot control me anymore. You cannot make me disappear anymore. I exist, I matter. My pain is real. My truth is valid. And no amount of silence can erase that. So I'm asking you, what do I do now? How do I move forward from here? How do I build a life in the ruins of the one he destroyed? How do I become whole when I've spent my entire life being broken? I'm listening. I'm ready. Tell me there's hope. Tell me there's a way out. Tell me I'm not alone in this silence, please.